Welcome to Whole Fit Talks. This is a show just for you, someone who's taking ownership of their health, leading their life, and living their legacy. And I'm glad we found each other because I am another you. Thanks for being here. And now on to this week's episode.
Great to have you in. So normally on the last Wednesday of the month, I do Q&A day. Been doing that actually started off in Periscope, right? Years ago. So I usually do that kind of a show on the last Wednesday of the month, but I thought it would be a good opportunity for us to continue a conversation that many of you were able to join me on last week. So I did a video. It was called What Do We Have Here? It's had over 180,000 views in a week. And there's been a lot of conversation around it. Of course, it's one of many videos being shared right now that are opening up people's perhaps awareness of what may be going on and offering information that is not simply echoing the narrative, right? And so I wanted to use this time together today to talk about a few things, actually. And first of all, hey guys, jumping in, it's so great to have you live. And I hope to keep this under an hour so that it will be under an hour. So we'll have some time to connect and do a little Q&A at the end. But I want to talk today about our humanness, our awareness, our willingness, and using our voice. And I want to talk about what comes up when that happens. Because I think this is a topic that we all are really experiencing right now. Many for the first time. And I've done a lot of this work. I still am right there in this with you, doing this work of sharing unpopular things at times. And I want to talk about what I've learned through that experience over the years and perhaps speak to what you may be going through. But before I do that, I want to open up recognizing my own humanness in all of this. So this video I did last week, I had many emotions as I prepared it and as I voiced it with you. And not everything I said on that video was said perfectly or how I wish it had come out. And, as I was listening to the recording to upload it, and I, slapped some music on the front and on the end of it to upload it to the podcast and onto YouTube, I didn't edit it at all. I left it unedited. Even the long, uncomfortable pauses, kept those in too. You're welcome. But as I was listening back to it, I could feel my pain in many moments. And it's quite a process to have to, even after you voice something, a part of you already shifts. I know many of you have experienced that, where, you practice witnessing your own emotion, your own fear, and perhaps coming to a place of feeling compassion for yourself at times. But I want to open up by saying, I care very, very much about truth and health and freedom. And what I want to recognize with you is that my fear of our freedom being stripped from us is equatable to what many people are fearing right now around this virus. And, we're all coming into this conversation through our own lens, right? Through the work that we've done, through our own pain points. And I want you to know that I've read all of the comments, and I did leave every single comment up. I think we had well over 3,000 comments over on the Facebook page. And this is why I said I would not be able to reply to comments because I had a feeling it was going to bring a lot of that on. But I read them up. I left every single comment up, unless it was a threatening comment or a comment attacking another person in the thread. I knew there would be attacks coming my way, and that was fine. But I didn't allow comments up that attacked another person. But I did go through each comment, and in saying that, what I what I want to acknowledge is that as I was listening to the recording, I could feel my own anger being misdirected at one point specifically. And I want to open up by saying that my intention in doing that video and in talking about this is never to create division of any kind, specifically around the topic of vaccines, okay, which is already a very charged conversation, okay? And I understand there are many of you that feel very strongly about your decision to vaccinate, and I want to clarify and open up this talk today by clarifying that my feelings about this are not directed at you at all, okay? Regardless of where you stand on an issue such as vaccines, please know that you're not seen as less than, you're not seen as not informed enough if you are making an informed decision. And where I want to find common ground within this conversation is that topic. If you agree that you should have autonomy over your body and that it's your body and your choice, and in that space you decide to vaccinate, you have my full respect. As long as that is an informed decision. And I think that's what a lot of this conversation is opening up, is the gate we are about to open of that not being the option anymore, okay? If we are led into a time where we are led to believe that people around us, people within our own families, our extended families, our close friends, if we are led to believe that somebody is now a biological threat because they do not vaccinate, I trust you can see the danger in this. And so I wanted to open that up, apologizing if I had you feeling as though I was coming at you, because I'm not. We are on the same side of this, sister. If we both, even if we do not hold the same opinion when it comes to vaccines, that's fine, as long as we are both coming from the same point of understanding that it is our body and our choice, okay? You are allowed to ask questions, and I would say that within the vaccination topic is probably one of the best places to begin that work, because it is an area where you are not encouraged to ask questions, and that is a good indication of something where you do need to ask questions. And if you are someone who is always vaccinated, maybe at this point in time you're starting to question it. Go with that, okay? See where that leads you. Perhaps you didn't have the time or the information years ago to look into this. And I think that's what this is really asking of all of us right now, is with this time we've been given, are we willing to look at things maybe a little bit deeper than what we have in the past? Guys, it's so great to have so many of you on live. And I will flip back through the comments as we get towards the end. I curated the information that I did in that blog post. It's called What Do We Have Here? I curated that information for you so that you could look when you're ready, okay? You could look at this information. And again, I stand for medical freedom. As a family, I'll speak on behalf of us as a family, we don't have much interaction with the medical system. We haven't aside from birthing my girls in a hospital setting, we haven't. And yet I'm someone who has paid generously, millions in fact, into our Canadian healthcare system over the last 5 years without a choice, right? Many of you are aware of our healthcare model in Canada, right? Much of our income goes towards our taxes, and much of our taxes go towards our quote unquote free healthcare. I'm very concerned about the gate we are about to open. And when we talked last, in this conversation, there were some questions that I raised in that talk that I am encouraging us all to be asking at this point. And if we open this gate, what we all need to be aware of, regardless of where we're coming at this conversation from, if we open this gate, can we ever close it again? The question, some other questions I was asking during this topic was, does anything that we do on an individual level matter when it comes to our health and personal responsibility if in the end we are all treated in the same way, as if there's a one-size-fits-all approach within this solution, we'll call it, right? If we give the government ownership of our body and our health and our children through something like a mandatory vaccine, where does that take us next, right? We're really, truly, guys, living in a time where we just need to be asking questions. And if we come from that place of being confident in what we find, then that's what we are honoring, okay? And so I wanted to open up this conversation clarifying that, because I'm sorry if I came, if you felt not heard or felt attacked in any way. That was certainly not my intention. We really are living in a time right now where we have to be able to look our children in the eyes in 20 years and explain what's happening right now. So I want to transition. I wanted to open up with that, but I want to transition into a conversation around awareness and around our personal willingness to look at things right now, our courage and using our voice, okay? This year of 2020, so many of us opened up in January talking about the clarity that will come in this year of 2020, this 2020 vision. We were excited about that idea, but perhaps we didn't understand what this was going to entail. We were entering this time where there are many things, the veil is lifting, right? There are things that we're learning, there are things we're seeing, and things feel very shaky right now, don't they? They do feel shaky because the matrix, if you will, is shattering. The veil is being lifted. And through that, we are all coming into this with emotion. We're all feeling much of the same things, and we're coming at this at different angles, you know. I think, and part of the separation we're feeling is as we learn things and as our own awareness is changing, we feel this responsibility to like wake people up, right? We feel like everybody needs to learn this. And this is what I really want to dive into today, because what I've been recognizing through all of this is it's not for everybody right now, okay? Think about even waking someone up in general. Like, how many of you have been woken up in the middle of the night by somebody and you're just like totally ticked, right? The very act of waking someone up from sleep causes this reaction of being irritated. I mean, let's say it's 2 a.m. and you smell smoke and you wake up and you go to wake up everyone in your house. Immediately, they're not super happy with you until they realize there's a fire. It takes time in this process, and you cannot force an awakening on people if they're not ready for that yet. It simply shows up at the right times when they're ready. And hey, I am so grateful for those times when information showed up to me in the right time. I know all of you can think about a situation in your life, whether it's the work that you do or the way that you take care of your health or whatever. Somebody showed up at your right time. And that's really important to reflect on, because maybe if they had showed up with that information 5 years prior, you would not have received it in the same readiness that you are now. There's a quote I've shared in the past, which I think is really powerful to understand. The messenger can only deliver the message to those who are a match to the message. So don't stress yourself out saying things to people who can't hear. And I think this can really help us come to this place of understanding that we are all coming into this conversation at different readiness levels, and that's also by design, okay? I want to get into some of that. Now, sometimes you can't hear what somebody's saying because there's so much noise in front of you. I was thinking about this the other day as I was blending up a smoothie. I kid you not, every time I turn on my Vitamix and that blender starts going, or every time I turn on the vacuum to vacuum the house, somebody will start talking to me in the house, right? And it's like they're trying to talk louder than the vacuum or the blender going, right? And I'm like, I turn at them and I'm annoyed, right? Because I've got all this noise in front of me and I can't hear what they're saying. But they don't realize that, right? Because they're across the room and that noise isn't right in front of them, right? So they keep talking and they keep going and I'm like, stop talking, I can't hear anything. There's a lot of this playing out right now, right? And it's sometimes that, and it's sometimes there's so much noise and distraction that we actually cannot hear and see what might be going on. And sometimes it's that someone isn't at the point yet in their life where they can hear, okay? They haven't done some of this work already to be able to hear what's going on, okay? Is this landing? I want to go deep into this. So, you know, what many of you have been experiencing in these last few weeks is the blow, the ridicule that comes when you speak up about things that challenge the narrative. So we'll use the video that I did last week. It had around 2,000 shares on it, right? It had like over 180,000 views. And for example, I have 25,000 or so people that actually follow my brand page. So what that means is a good majority of the people that saw that video saw it through people sharing it who have never experienced me or my work, my voice, my trust before, and it angered them. And they came at me because they came into this conversation through someone else that shared it that perhaps doesn't normally talk about things like self-leadership and having a hunger for truth. So that context was missing, right? So hence the attacks came, right? Because there was no relationship there. Some of you shared the video and perhaps you had very confirming comments below it. Maybe there's been a lot of things you've shared over the last few weeks where the majority of the comments have been well received, that they've enjoyed you sharing that information because it's not the first time you're talking about it. And then some of you might be sharing things right now and then you take it down, you delete it the minute somebody comments negatively. Like you're forgetting where your intuition led you in that moment, okay? And maybe it's because it's the first time that you've shared in that way. And so it just wasn't received well, right? And so the thing to understand is anytime you share something that challenges the narrative, you're disrupting many things. You're disrupting a level of comfort and safety with the person who's taking that in. And again, we're all coming into this conversation from a different place. And remember, you know, it's so important right now to practice developing a stronger relationship with your intuition and with what you know is truth, okay? When somebody disagrees with you, this is actually a great thing. I want to encourage you today, as you're sharing information in this time we're living through, to not be tempted to just delete a post right away or think that what you're thinking is wrong just because somebody disagrees with you. This is actually happening for you to help you develop a stronger sense of who you are and to be able to think critically. And so when somebody, let's say you post something and somebody leaves a comment that you're like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. You thought maybe this is an interesting time because I think a lot of us are thinking, well, surely everybody is asking questions right now, right? Like this is just getting a bit ridiculous. What's going on? How you think everyone's asking questions and you might post something that's encouraging people to do so and they, right? It's like you get slapped. There's a lot of that going on right now. And the thing I want to encourage you to remember as you're doing this work, perhaps for the first time, is when someone's commenting in a way that's challenging, I guess, what you're saying, run it through some lenses, okay? Number one, do they have a counter argument to what you're saying? Because what you're seeing going on a lot right now is that's ridiculous, or just a lot of very superficial slamming, right? Do they have a counter argument? Do they have something that presents a narrative that actually makes sense? Because maybe what you share is off. Maybe somebody could Maybe someone who's done a little bit more work and has asked questions could share with you where that's off, right? That's going to happen in a time like this because there's so much being shaken, like the snow globe is being shaken right now. But a more important thing that I look at, I always do, is does this person's life speak in alignment to what they're sharing? Are they a free thinker? Do I see evidence of that in their life, or are they a repeater? Are they simply a repeater of what mainstream media is feeding? Okay, the key thing here, guys, is don't take things personally. Remember, everyone's coming at this from their own angle. So you want to, before you go and delete something that intuitively felt like the right thing to share, when you're challenged on that, this is a time for you to develop a stronger sense of critical thinking and really relationship with yourself. But remember, it's not your job to wake someone else up. Let's just let that sink in. And trust me, I come into this, I feel responsible. This is something I'm always working through. I feel this responsibility to my kids, to our future, to be asking these questions, but I've had to be careful not to have that cross this line of wanting everyone to wake up, wanting everyone to think the same or ask the questions. Like, that is not my responsibility, actually. I can only own what I contribute to this situation. I am not responsible for how that's received even. And I'm sharing this with you because this is an important thing for us all to be understanding in this process. This has to be in the right timing for the person on the other end. It would be great if more people were willing to look into things like ID 2020 or Event 201 or the connections between trafficking and the upper echelons of government and Hollywood, but not everyone right now can, okay? There are layers to this for people. And I also want to go into I've been thinking about this lately, as I've been thinking about what our role is in all of this. I don't think that everybody needs to be sharing in the same way right now. Everybody does play a role here. Whether they realize it or not, we are all playing a role in the creation of our new world. Chris and I were talking about this the other day. For example, we all have our roles. We're very, you guys know in your relationships, you have different love languages and different gifts. Maybe you've done your strengths finder. You understand your gifts and what you bring to your role, perhaps as a business owner, as a leader. So we were talking about this, and for example, in our relationship, and maybe the reason we've worked so well for like 20 years is he sees things in the physical, whereas I see things in the spiritual. So let's say we're leaving a concert and it's late at night and it's dark out and we're in a city we don't know. He not only has alternative routes planned for our way back to the car, but he also has a plan should something come up while we're walking back to our car, okay? It's why he's great at his job as a firefighter. He's able to leverage a strong amount of situational awareness as he goes into a fire, okay? Whereas I sense things in the spiritual. I grew up with this knowing. So for example, coming back to the topic of vaccines, when I was a new mom and presented with the vaccine schedule, all of my senses went off, okay? I could sense this was a schedule created by people who have never been able to explain the miracle of creation. My cultivation of this has come stronger through the years as I unclogged myself. This is a very important thing to understand about free thinking. I had to do work to unclog myself from harmful chemicals, from heavy metals, from fake food, from mainstream media. I had to live in a drug and alcohol-free body in order to be able to develop a stronger sense here, okay? So I share that with you because there are times when Chris's situational awareness serves us, and there are times when my spiritual awareness serves us. And I think, I want to come into this conversation around the roles that we all play in us understanding what we bring to this situation. Some of you are here to speak up boldly against this narrative right now, because it's going to take many exposures to this different narrative in order for other people to eventually look at it. Think about the last thing you purchased. We know this in sales. It takes many exposures to a new idea, a new product, a new anything, before it has our attention. It's just the way it is. And so anybody right now who is speaking up boldly against this narrative is very required in a world where we are being only spoon-fed one narrative. Because you're going to notice that it's going to take time. Let's say you're really closed off to things that are being shared right now that are not what mainstream media is sharing. Let's say you're really closed off to it because you're feeling your sense of safety threatened. It's going to take perhaps a year of more people starting to look at that and talk about it before you might be willing to look at it. And that's okay. It's just the way this works. The reason there are a lot of people sharing right now, not a lot, I should say a small amount of people sharing something that's not going along with the narrative, is because they started doing that years and years ago, okay? Everybody has a role in this situation. Some of you are not meant to speak up around the narrative. You know that what you're meant to bring to this situation is prayer, is time and quiet to help fortify this situation for those that perhaps are speaking up, okay? Some of you are actually in the role right now of challenging those that are opposing the narrative. And this is an important role as well. If you've been someone who in the past couple of weeks has come at some or challenged people with their narrative, you are also playing an important role here, because you're helping people think more critically themselves through witnessing the conversations that may happen there. So challenging it is important. Asking questions of those asking questions is important, because it's helping us come closer and closer to truth. Now, if you're shaming people for speaking up, we are at a critical time where if you're going to do that, you must be confident in your stance. And you must provide a counter argument. You cannot right now be telling people to be quiet and to stop sharing if you don't have something that you're sharing with as much conviction. And some people right now, like we've covered, are not meant to understand this right now for various reasons. They're going to actually need the proof, and they're going to need to see things come out, even in mainstream media, before they actually believe it. And I mean, even mainstream media, you guys, they will have to start reporting more accurately about what's going on, because the puppet master is like losing the strings, so to speak, there, okay? So I think even this week we're seeing things coming out of the mainstream channels that they've never talked about before. Now, what I want to emphasize here, though, you guys, is being very clear on what you know you're meant to bring to the situation, because this is where the seat of personal pain lives. If you know your role is to, for example, be speaking up right now, you have that conviction, you know something's not right, and you're not asking questions and you're not talking about it. If you know you're meant to and you're not, there is a lot of pain that lives in that place because you're avoiding a tap on your heart. And when you have a deep knowing of what is happening, it can actually be very destructive to be silent or to dilute your voice. This is what we would refer to as an inconvenient truth, when you know something's true and you're not speaking up for it. Now, the reason some of you have been tasked or tapped on the heart to be using your voice right now is because you've been prepared for this moment years and years ago. I'll just share personally. Some of you may have heard me speak last year at Leadership Retreat. It was in my talk called Leading from the Front. And I shared with you several times in my life where even though I was shaking, I spoke up. And I shared, probably my earliest experience with this was when I was 11. I had been molested. And I had to go to court to testify against a family member that didn't believe me. This was a friend of our family that had done this. And you can imagine being young and having to try to convince not a courtroom, but a family member, right? And this man ended up going to jail. And through that experience, many, many adult women came forward to speak up as well. And I remember, and it's so wild, my oldest, Chloe, is turning 11 this year. And when I think back to what it felt like to be 11 for me, she seems so young, and I felt a lot older at that age, But many of you speaking up right now are speaking up because you have roots like this. You perhaps were the one in school that stood up to the bully. Even that's an interesting topic to dissect. We can all think of situations in our lives where there's been a bully. Were you the one that stood up to the bully, or were you the one that repeated what the bully would do so that you could fit in? These are important things to be asking in a time like this, to understand, perhaps why we aren't speaking up, or perhaps why we are. I also, in that talk I gave, I talked about what happens when we speak up. There is a force that will try to pull you down. So I talked about crabs in a bucket. Do you guys remember that? I'm sure a lot of you have heard that analogy before, that you can have a whole bucket of crabs and the lid's off this bucket, and the crabs for the longest time don't realize there's a way out. And then the minute somebody starts to crawl out of that bucket, what do all the other crabs look to do? They look to pull that crab down. And that is what you're facing in a time like this, when you are opening up and sharing with people and you feel like you're being pulled down. Like, you be quiet. You don't talk about these things. You don't ask questions. Be a good girl. You don't go against the narrative. You don't challenge that. That's unsafe. All this programming right now that's happening, that's that force that's looking to pull that down. For some people, you've already gone through this gate in your life where you've been ridiculed for standing up for what you believe is right, and you're okay with it now. It's actually not, you don't fear what people think. You care more about leading. You care more about doing what's right than what people think of it. And this is a space that many of us are being asked to move towards right now, to care more about doing the right thing and finding the truth within this. What is going on? Asking questions of it, and not just taking what you're being spoon-fed. But it is never okay to be in a situation where you are not allowed to ask questions of what is going on. That is not okay. And caring more about that process than what people think of it as you do. Guys, the addiction to being approved of is blocking so many of us from truth and from connection to our truth. If the lens with which you share through is always what will people think, or like, it's in that moment, right, where you post something and then the second somebody says something that challenges you, you delete it out of fear of not being accepted, right? This is a very real big thing that I think we need to understand is going on right now. There are a lot of people holding back from sharing because they worry about what people will think. They worry about being challenged on it. They worry that they're not maybe allowed to change. Maybe you've always held a belief, and it's scary to you to be recognizing that maybe that wasn't what was true. And that's okay. We need to show ourselves and each other grace right now as we work through this process. Because the thing, like our brain knows that group thinking is safest, right? Your brain knows this. If you repeat what everyone else is saying, you're not going to be challenged, and then you're going to be safe. And that's what the brain wants, but that's not what the heart wants. If you fear what people think when you challenge a narrative, that same fear follows you into the doctor's office that first time your baby is going to be injected. Do you know what I mean? If you can't ask questions right now, when it really comes down to it, you'll struggle to ask questions. If you seek validation from people, it's a reflection of the personal work that you want to do. And it's work to do this. It is hard work to do this because we seek unity, right? We don't want to feel separate from each other through situations. It doesn't feel good to have that tension that exists at times when you're doing something that maybe your best friend doesn't think the same way on, you know? But this is where we need to do the work to accept and to love ourselves through that process, because then we do teach other people to do that, right? I think it's a very interesting time. I don't know that any of us could say we've ever lived through something like this before, where, and I want to, acknowledge that what some of you might be feeling right now is that there is this truth emerging, and it's not in the typical delivered way that mainstream media might serve it up. For example, you might notice that you're getting tapped on the heart quite a bit around a certain question or theme. Maybe you're starting to notice patterns of body and mind control that have existed for a long time. Whether you look at the healthcare industry, you look at government, you look at Hollywood, it's like one day, like, boom, like, how did I not see this, right? I mentioned on stories on Instagram yesterday, do you guys remember stereograms? Those like images that are all pixelated, and when you're too close to it, you're too close to the image, you don't see the actual image. You don't see it until you slowly start to look further away and get some distance from it and see the bigger picture, and then you actually see the picture. That's kind of like what we're going through right now, where it's understanding that sometimes we're so close to something that we don't actually see what's going on. And it's been really interesting to note, like mainstream media, for example, you'll notice will only cover certain narratives, like how stupid Trump is or how wise Bill Gates is. They keep feeding this idea. But you have to question that, because if you start to look at all of the commotion happening right now, for example, around the topic of Hollywood pedophilia or the growing concerns of mandatory vaccines, you'll notice that they're not looking at they're not talking about this. They won't go there. There's certain things they won't do, even when so many people are starting to talk about it. They're not talking it. They're not, what they're presenting does not reflect where people are at. And I mean, there comes a time in all of this where we have to confront our own ignorance around it. I have certainly had to do that more than ever before in the last 6 weeks. We make decisions as we go based on what we know. And we just need to be really careful right now that we're not ignorantly moving forward under this assumption of what we think is true, that we're challenging that. And there's a lot of people speaking up right now, more and more every day, you guys, to help more people find their own voice and be brave in sharing it. I want to kind of end this topic by saying that when we are rooted in love and awareness and our own power, this is the force that brings the whole thing down, okay? I I feel like I've gone through this like dark night of the soul thing for the last like 5 to 6 weeks. I would with a willingness look at things that I've ignorantly looked at in the past, and I would challenge it. I would start looking at poking holes in it. I would really look at it and I would feel all of the emotion, and it was heavy. And then I would go for a run or something to just help move that emotion, because this is a very heavy time. And then I would spend the rest of the day really taprooting that joy and love with the kids, and just, it's just been this constant thing. And I've come through this. Now I'm in this place of understanding, like, we actually don't need to be afraid of what's playing out here, because I do believe we are all ultimately going to have a choice in how this goes. It's what is so important about this time is that you are using it to cultivate your own awareness so that you're prepared, so that when that moment comes, it doesn't catch you off guard, that you really are prepared, and you're working right now in this time to prepare for that. Whether that's financially, maybe in your business, you're realizing that, like in Canada, for example, it's atrocious what's happening with our economy, and some decisions that have been made that are frightening economically for Canada. And so maybe what you're doing right now is you are looking at different methods to create more freedom financially for your family, so that as things do continue, you're prepared for that. This is what this time is for. Health-wise, same thing. Where can you detach from that reliance on government, for example? Because if you have a heavy reliance on government, they already feel as though they own you. And so you're not going to have as much choice. And so I'm speaking specifically to like school systems. If everything in your heart right now is telling you that mandatory vaccines, for example, do not feel like the right way forward, if you have kids in the public school system, that's going to be an issue you'll have to confront, right? So it's using this time right now to prepare for what is likely coming. You know that point in a song where like the tension's building and the best part of the song is about to come? There's a great playlist I've been listening to on Spotify. It's like movie soundtracks. It's so good. I'll put this into a blog post, and I'll link that up for you. That's where we're at right now, I feel. We are at this point. I do believe there are going to be some things that shift and come into more public awareness in the next couple of weeks that help us all to understand we are creating a new world right now. And it's good. It's good. There are a lot of things that needed to be shattered, because I do think we need to look back. There's so much conversation of like, when will we go back to normal, to what we had before? And I think that as hard as this time is right now of still being in lockdown, we can recognize that what we had before was not working in many ways. And this was in some ways needed for us to be able to rebuild the new, just like a muscle, right? Like you have to tear down the fibers in order to grow and in order to become stronger. And there will be so much, I do feel that, I truly do. As much as I have felt a lot of fear around this in the last few weeks, I have come to this place of clarity, of understanding what's going to take place, So I guess all that to say, this time right now, you guys, is not about changing people. It's really up to everybody to do their own work here. And our greatest work, what I'm realizing, our greatest work through this is to be able to come to a place of compassion, even for those that it's hardest to. There's a lot of dark stuff unveiling right now, and that is something every day I remind myself of. Is this is not going to heal or move in the right direction until we can come to that place of compassion for ourselves as we make mistakes, as I opened up with. We need to own pieces of that and show that compassion at times to ourselves and understand that we're all doing the best with what we know. But I truly think the old has to die in order for the new to come. And I think it's going to be beautiful. And while I think there are some very good things unfolding at government levels, we're also going to see some frightening things unfold. And all that to say, through this change, what we need to recognize is our own voice, our own power, and the role that we all truly do play in the way this goes. And this isn't about a hero, right? This isn't about a president. This isn't about somebody saving the day, making this all better for all of us. We have to really recognize that the power is in us. It always has been. We've just been under a system for so long that has made us forget that. Okay, so anyway, we're almost at an hour, but I want to just scroll up and read your comments. Do you guys have any questions or thoughts on this? Are there things that have been coming up for you through this process? Especially when it comes to perhaps using your voice for the first time around things that you typically wouldn't talk about. It's hard, but I promise you it will get easier. And hey, listen, there are some relationships that may dissolve in your life through this. Because again, not everybody's on that same wavelength, right? Okay, let me just... It's hard. There's a lot of us on live right now, which is great. It's just tricky to find the questions within it all, if there are any. But yeah, I know a lot of us are feeling the same way. Everybody is. Everybody's feeling this sense of disorientation right now, and all that comes with just fear of the unknown. It's always been unknown, I guess, is where we need to come to this place. It's always been unknown. We've just had, at times, this somewhat false sense of safety. And again, recognize how powerful we all are as a collective in creating the new. The thought that I continue to come back to through all of this is we need to be able to look our children in the eyes in 20 years and explain what just happened here, and what we did about it, and how we steered that. And it takes a collective. Okay, so perhaps what I'll do is I'll just scroll up really quick, see if we've got a few questions. I will upload this to the podcast and as a blog. I don't know if you guys subscribe to the blog, but I'll post it up there in the next couple days. I see a lot of you asking, why perhaps people in places that could speak out right now aren't. Perhaps you're thinking of doctors. There's a lot of nurses they're speaking out through other people. I'm sure you've seen a lot of those videos, even coming out of New York this week. Hollywood, for example, I see some of you asking, why aren't people in Hollywood talking about this? The thing you have to recognize is there is such a force, there's such a grip on this whole situation, and unfortunately, a lot of people just can't, that are in positions to speak out about this. But you're going to see pieces coming together that create an awareness. One thing I want to share with you that's going to be really great. I mentioned on the last video, Operation Underground Railroad, Tim Ballard. So they have a new video coming out, a movie. It's like a blockbuster vibe to it, called, it's either called Freedom or The Sound of Freedom. And it's opening up the lines of communication for people around sex trafficking and how big it is. And that's going to be really interesting because like Jim Caviezel is playing Tim Ballard, and it's a very well done production. You can find the trailer for it right now if you go onto YouTube, and you'll have shivers when you watch it. But when you realize, so I'm just sharing that as an example of how you're going to start to see multiple pieces coming together that have more people than ever before asking questions. And that demand will be so there that mainstream media, for example, won't even be able to keep that silent anymore, you know? So, yeah, he's a true hero for sure. There's a lot of people doing things behind the scenes that we just don't see yet. But I think there's going to be at least one thing in the next couple of weeks that will help make sense of a lot of what's going on right now. And, you know, yeah, I see a lot of you saying, you know, New York, for example, has mandatory vaccines for school right now, and this terrifies. Yeah, the thing to understand is as this moves forward, there's going to be rings to this. The inner ring will be government control. So if you rely on the government for your paycheck, Canada, we're in a bad situation right now. There's a lot of free money being printed, right, to help people out, which is a great thing, but it's also discouraging. Like in Canada, for example, we're just printing lots of free money and have no opening date announced yet, right? As small businesses continue to be shut down. So, you know, if you're reliant on the government for your income right now, you're in that inner ring. If your kids go to public school, you're in the inner ring. They will start there. What I predict happening is they'll start there, and then they'll start to move into the outer rings where you will have to pay to avoid it, just like we do now, right? For years, I've had to pay to have a form filled in to state that vaccines go against our conscious or religious belief, and I'd have to pay $80 per child every single year. That'll continue. We may even see that happen with passports, driver's licenses, but this is why this time period is so important. Is if you are opposed to that, it's just being aware that that's the direction it will head in, and being prepared to use your voice, your money, whatever that will unfold. We'll be clear on what that needs to look like. Yeah, I mean, a lot of conversation about government. I mean, the thing is, the reason I've been paying particular attention to Trump in the U.S. is he's doing some very unconventional things that, the last few, or for sure in the last decade, things that have not been challenged. So I like that. I don't like what I'm seeing happen in Canada, to be honest. I don't like it at all. There's a lot of skirting around the issues. There's a lot of just conversations that seem to be a waste of time. And again, honestly, you guys, I've never looked at a politician as somebody who's going to save the day. There's definitely not that viewpoint here at all. But unfortunately, right now, decisions are being made where government is about to overstep, about to cross that line of ownership of your body, of your children, of your health. All of that, the fine print is there, right? So it's just really being aware of that. And yeah. I know, I'm seeing your comments. It's wild times we're living through. Okay, well, let me close this out before I lose the recording. And I hope this was helpful for you guys. I guess the core of this talk really being, if you feel it's on your heart to be speaking up about certain things and questioning the narrative, you need to follow that tap on your heart, but just be prepared for what comes with that. But it's happening for you. And it's a very good place to arrive in when you are at a place that you can share with less of a grip of worrying what people think of you. It's a very free place to be. That is the goal. That could be one of the best things that comes out of this whole experience for you, is that you learned the art of sharing your voice and releasing this attachment to what people think of you for doing that, because that is a cage and it's a very uncomfortable place to live. And you know, in the act of you sharing something that challenges someone's narrative, often you're going to be met with that good girl energy, especially for women. Yeah, you're going to be met. A lot of the comments are people who have never stepped out of that cage themselves. And so it's all of that coming on you. So you have to be able to step back and see, when you're looking at comments, ask yourself, is this a free thinker, or is this somebody who's simply repeating what they've always been told? And that can help you in a time like this. So anyway, thank you guys for joining live. And hey, thanks for, just being in this and understanding that we're in this together, and we're going to make mistakes as we go, but it is always a good thing to ask questions. And I hope that we're all coming to a place of understanding how important that is right now. So anyway, we'll see you back when we see you back. Bye for now.
Hey, you made it to the end. If you're not sick of me yet and you want to find other episodes and show notes, you can go to wholefit.com/podcast. If you do love the show, I would be so grateful if you take a moment to share it out with your community and leave a review over on iTunes so that more people can find the show. Until next time.